Tonight, domestic terror takes center stage.
Your actions here today will tell us how much it matters.
Less than a month after an 18-year-old shot and killed 10 black people in a Buffalo grocery store.
I understand my charges.
And setting new records.
It's hard with these gas prices just going up. It's ridiculous.
Gas prices hit nearly $5 a gallon. Plus, death to the dictator.
Is it realistic that the regime could be overthrown? Absolutely.
Protesters in Iran call for regime change. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Targeting homegrown terror. Good evening in Washington, D.C. I'm Jenna Browder. A metastasizing domestic terrorism threat. That was the topic before the Senate Judiciary Committee today. It comes 3 weeks after a shooting at a Buffalo supermarket that left 10 black people dead. The suspect, now charged with domestic terrorism motivated by hate and accused of targeting his victims because of their race. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke followed today's hearing and has our top story. Caitlin?
Jenna, while lawmakers agree something needs to be done to address domestic terrorism, today's hearing started with finger-pointing.
We cannot deny that hate has a big platform. There are media figures like Tucker Carlson dragging racist conspiracy theories into mainstream America.
Report by the Center of Strategic and International Studies found that 40% of all domestic terrorist attacks in 2021 were from the left.
After that showing, Professor Robert Pape testified it's these political logjams that make it nearly impossible for Washington to address threats to our democracy.
Build from the center and to build working groups of the 10 of the senators who can really work together the most, and to build out from there, and then to build a national conversation from that group, regardless of what happens in the outcome of the 2022 election or so forth. The difficulty is that the electoral pressures are so intense that it's getting in the way of any serious governings.
The son of a Buffalo victim called on lawmakers to do something, or basically get out of the way for someone else to get the job done.
My mother's life mattered. My mother's life mattered. And your actions here today will tell us how much it matters to you.
Former FBI Special Agent Michael German urged that monitoring and acting on social media threats could help prevent future attacks.
The white supremacist attackers in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and El Paso all gained access to materials online and expressed their hateful and violent intentions on social media.
The problem, he pointed out, is the difficulty of zeroing in on comments that truly represent a threat of violence. Homeland Security issued a warning Tuesday that extremist groups are already going online to encourage copycat attacks of what happened at the Uvalde school.
Our domestic extremists and our domestic terrorists had learned from the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of jihadi terrorists, and they were also using online forums effectively to do likewise.
Because of the overwhelming amount of online threats, state intelligence centers were set up to focus solely on sifting through posts and passing on credible threats to federal authorities. Donnell Harvin ran the center in Washington, D.C.
You can say just about any hateful, violent thing you want online. Our Constitution protects that, but you can't say that directed towards a person or a place.
Harvin says the country is ripe with division that domestic extremist groups can exploit, and they make those fights their own as a recruitment tactic.
We've seen this recently as domestic extremists adopt the narrative surrounding abortion rights, acts of violence and vandalism increasing against pro-life groups. Just this morning, for example, a faith-based pregnancy center in Buffalo was firebombed by radical abortion advocates. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. Well, in the wake of Buffalo and Uvalde, which left 19 children and 2 teachers dead, actor Matthew McConaughey took the podium at the White House today after visiting Capitol Hill. The Uvalde native addressing reporters in a moving and impassioned speech calling for gun responsibility. McConaughey speaking of the children whose funerals he attended, including 9-year-old Ellie Garcia, who was memorizing a Bible verse before her death.
Deuteronomy 6:5. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. That's who Ellie was becoming. But she never got to read it.
And McConaughey also addressing the state of the children's bodies after the massacre.
Due to the exceptionally large exit wounds of an AR-15 rifle. Most of the body so mutilated that only DNA test or green Converse could identify them.
McConaughey's remarks come as a bipartisan group of senators works towards an agreement on gun reform legislation. Proposals include changing criminal background checks to include juvenile records, giving states incentives to enact red flag laws to remove guns from people who may be dangerous, and funding for school security and mental health. In economic news tonight, as inflation sticks to record highs, a new warning from the World Bank of a resurgence of 1970s era stagflation. The national average for gasoline up another nickel from yesterday, getting closer and closer to the $5 mark, a target it could soon hit. So is any relief in sight?
It's hard with these gas prices just going up. It's ridiculous.
Drivers from coast to coast feeling the record high prices at the pump.
I honestly don't look anymore. I don't have a choice. I have to get to work.
The national average now at $4.92 a gallon, according to AAA. That's up a nickel from yesterday, more than a quarter from 1 week ago, and nearly $2 from 1 year ago. And many predict it could reach $5 by the end of this week, if not sooner.
It really does limit the amount of extra driving that I do.
Numerous factors are pushing prices up, according to AAA, including the war in Ukraine, the supply chain crisis, increased demand, and less production from U.S. companies concerned about the Biden administration's policies toward fossil fuels and focus on green policies. So is there any relief in sight? It doesn't appear so, according to analyst Patrick DeHaan of GasBuddy, as gas prices hit new highs in the Midwest.
Gasoline inventories in the Great Lakes are at their lowest seasonal level on record, amidst still strong demand in light of high prices and low supply.
DeHaan says the upcoming hurricane season will be key. Any hit to Gulf Coast or East Coast refineries could send prices even higher.
You know, I'm traveling to see family, so you gotta do what you gotta do. The other thing is, I have a car that only takes premium gas, so it is what it is.
As many look to Washington, the pressure is on the White House. Since President Biden took office, the national average has more than doubled. Well, overseas tonight, in Iran, hundreds of thousands of Iranians have taken to the streets in protest. But they're not chanting death to America or death to Israel. Instead, they're crying out death to the dictator. Chris Mitchell reports.
In more than 40 cities throughout Iran, its citizens are calling for regime change with cries like death to the dictator and our enemy is not America. And as it has in the past, the government has sent out its security forces to brutally suppress the protest. Dr. Amir Hamidi came to Israel as part of the Shoshana mission to Israel, a goodwill delegation from Iranian organizations outside of Iran. They met with Israeli officials, Iranian expats, and came to tell the world what's happening to the Iranian people.
Lots of people uprising because of the mismanagement of the economy, and people are unemployed, people are not working. Food is so expensive, they cannot afford to even eat, and they cannot manage the country. And brutality is unbelievable. Human rights are violated. Lots of political prisoners. People get executed for no reason.
The slogans say it all. These slogans want to do away with the regime, with the Islamic Republic. They say our enemy is not the United States. Our enemy is here in Iran. What they say is we don't want neither Gaza nor Lebanon. Our life is for Iran. So it is about themselves and their hopes and aspirations.
These protests in 2022 followed demonstrations all the way back to the Green Revolution in 2009, calling for regime change. The question is, could these protests succeed when others have not.
Is it realistic that the regime could be overthrown?
Absolutely, no doubt about that, because you cannot force the people to live in past 43 years, and they cannot have any freedom of speech, freedom of work. It doesn't exist.
Pastor Nazanin Bahestani told CBN's George Thomas how some Iranians are turning away from Islam in the midst of this crisis.
They are so fed up of Islam, and they see everything from Islam's point of view, because the government, the leaders saying that because of Islam, you have to endure. And they say, we don't want to endure this religion. So many are calling us and wanting a new God, wanting to look up to Jesus.
And that was Chris Mitchell reporting. Thank you, Chris. Coming up, a first-hand look at the humanitarian crisis at the border and one sheriff's work to stem the tide. Welcome back. Culberson County, Texas. It's a hub for human trafficking and drug smuggling. This remote region is Border Sheriff Oscar Carrillo's territory. CBN's Heather Sells took a ride along with the sheriff to see firsthand the extent of the crisis at the southern border.
Culberson County is one of the Lone Star State's largest, 3 times the size of Rhode Island, and with just several thousand residents. Sheriff Oscar Carrillo says he knows why the cartels have begun to exploit it.
It's all about geography.
It means Culberson's border proximity and interstate highway makes the county a destination route for both human and drug smuggling.
We got Mexico on the south end of the county. We have New Mexico on the north end of the county. We got major corridors coming through here.
This is very treacherous terrain. You've got to watch your step out here. It's hot, there's wild animals, and it's remote, which is why it's become so popular with the cartels.
They have no clue where they're at. They have no GPS.
CBN News rode with Sheriff Carrillo to find out what makes the journey so dangerous. The migrants, often young men who've paid smugglers thousands, are typically dropped at the Rio Grande River. They are told to walk what could be days to a designated pickup spot along a highway.
It just sounds like it's so organized. They've got a plan.
To bolster their confidence before they attempt to navigate the desert, the smugglers give the migrants backpacks filled with water and cheap camouflage clothes. Still, hundreds are dying near the border each year. In 2021, the sheriff recovered 30 bodies, up from the normal 1 or 2. The main culprits, heat and dehydration. The day we joined him, a call came for another.
We're going to put it in the back of my truck.
This one, some 20 miles from Van Horn, the county seat. They have just recovered this body. It was likely out here for several days. It's so far been identified as a male who was born in 1994, and he does have some identification. So the hope is that they will be able to easily connect with family.
He's got a crucifix.
State law obligates the sheriff to investigate all deaths. That means examining the body and personal effects.
It's a prayer.
Later, on the edge of a road, Carrillo and his deputy transfer the body to an ambulance to begin the autopsy and notification of family in Guatemala.
It's really also an index of desperation.
El Paso-based analyst Dylan Corbett sees various reasons these migrants attempt to make it to the U.S. Worldwide, migration is up dramatically, thanks in part to the COVID pandemic. Economics and danger at home also push migrants.
It's not simply that people are coming seeking a better life. It's also that people, in many cases, are seeking just a bare life, just bare existence.
And Corbett says the broken U.S. asylum system is often driving migrants straight to the cartels.
If people need to cross, they'll work with less than savory folks to make it happen. And that involves criminals, that involves human smugglers. And sometimes those folks are also connected to cartels.
This is an example of what we're seeing on a traffic stop.
Sheriff Carrillo sees the smuggling throughout his county, people crammed into vehicles or waiting on a highway for a pickup that often doesn't come. Their debris, water bottles, clothing, and backpacks can be found along the road and off in the scrub. He is also beginning to see them in town.
When they get to this area, they're out of water, they're out of money. Sometimes their plan has fallen apart.
Carrillo's not alone. Border Patrol has installed rescue beacons and 911 signs, hoping to provide medical help before it's too late. Still, with numbers climbing in Culberson, both for deaths and apprehensions, and questions around Title 42, Carrillo is not optimistic.
We see the writing on the wall. We're experiencing it now, and we're anticipating a big increase.
That could also mean a very busy summer for the sheriff, his deputies, and all law enforcement here. Reporting in Culberson County, Heather Sells, CBN News.
When we come back, a new film explores a homeschool awakening, why more parents are investigating the benefits of homeschooling. Across the nation, parents are investigating the benefits of homeschooling their children like never before. Actor and family advocate Kirk Cameron explores this subject in his new documentary, The Homeschool Awakening. Wendy Griffith explains what he discovered.
I always viewed homeschooling as somewhat of a cult.
Quiet, reclusive.
The different people.
Abnormal in some way.
I could never picture myself doing it.
Oh no, those are weird. I'm not doing that.
Like these parents, Kirk Cameron admits he also once had a healthy fear of homeschooling.
And I thought homeschooling was like you had to be a Quaker or you had to be Amish. I was saying, I mean, does my wife need to wear a floor-length denim jumper, have a head covering? And, you know, where do we get the uniform? And then I realized that I was just out of touch with this incredible, robust community of people. There are experts and educational professionals creating curriculums that actually incorporate faith. What I'm learning is that parents are not stuck in a system that they're not happy with.
Today, 6 children later, all of whom were homeschooled at one time or another, Cameron says parents are waking up and holding the public school system more accountable.
And if you look at the public education system, removing prayer from schools, removing God and the Bible from school, and replacing those things with progressive ideas like the critical race theory, gender queer theory, and teaching children to decide whether or not they prefer to be a boy or a girl, to choose their own pronouns, and separating parents from their children's understanding of sexuality and when and how they're exposed to explicit material.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I don't really understand this idea that parents should decide what's being taught.
Give me a break.
In his new documentary, The Homeschool Awakening, Cameron credits the pandemic as a catalyst for this closer look at what kids were being taught.
And they're saying, you know what, the public school system has broken trust with us as parents. These kids are precious. God's given them to us, and we need to do better for them. And so millions are now successfully homeschooling their kids or taking them to private schools that can actually pass on their values, not undermine them.
What are some of your favorite interviews in the movie?
We document about 17 different families from rural backgrounds, from urban backgrounds, families that are entrepreneurs who have businesses, who are traveling around the country. And you find kids are getting their pilot's license at 17 years old. Kids are opening up restaurants and have baking businesses. Kids are learning outside with the entire world as their classroom, together with their siblings and with their parents and with their grandparents.
Cameron adds perhaps the best part of homeschooling is God gets to stay in the classroom.
The 10 Commandments.
The 10 Commandments, that's right.
We want our children to understand who they are, who God is, their place in the world, why they're here. These are questions that can only be answered when you are free to pass your faith to your children and to teach your children to see the world through the lens that God's given us. And so if you're a person of faith, you want people to understand history through the lens that recognizes the positive, life-giving principles of the faith that we've been given from our parents and our grandparents. Many parents are being told that that has no place in the education of their children at their school.
Kirk, is homeschooling just for Christians?
No, not at all. I would say that if you look at the statistics, it is not just Christians who are homeschooling their kids. There's people from all different faith backgrounds or no faith background at all. They're just looking for a better educational opportunity for their children. And when you think about it, the difference between one-on-one education or one-on-two or three or four or five is a completely different situation than one teacher and 30 kids in a classroom. And we're finding out that colleges are actually preferring kids who are homeschooled well because they're out-of-the-box thinkers, they're initiative takers, they're kids who are strong and well-rounded socially.
Kirk, what do you hope audiences will take away from seeing this film?
If you are just interested in a different option than what you currently are stuck with regard to educating your kids, check out the Homeschool Awakening, because it's going to give you a lot of hope. And it's not just me saying this. We have over a dozen families who are going to walk you through their journey, and you're going to see in full color how these families are not just surviving, but thriving.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Thank you, Wendy. And still ahead, a legacy that sticks. Celebrating the centennial of former First Lady Nancy Reagan with some new postage. Finally tonight, the U.S. Post Office is adding a new face to its First Lady's commemorative stamp collection. Nancy Reagan, wife of the 40th President Ronald Reagan, is joining the 5 other former First Ladies honored with their own stamps. At Monday's White House unveiling, current First Lady Jill Biden crediting Reagan for her efforts raising awareness for breast cancer, the Just Say No anti-drug youth campaign, and Alzheimer's.
With this stamp, we are affirming that she made such a difference.
And the stamp's dedication takes place July 6th, marking the 101st anniversary of Nancy Reagan's birth. And that's going to do it for Faith Nation. Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great evening, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.